All right, let me warmly welcome you to our conversation platform on Good Morning Nigeria. Today we're looking at the National Development Plan, the new National Development Plan, which will cover 2021 to 2025. That's about 5 years in all. But of course, to take you back, post independence in 1960. We've had various development plans, I think about 4 known ones, and then we've also had the rolling plans. We also have several other initiatives, that targeted at growing our economy. But the big question will be, for this new one, how will the plan be faithfully implemented? As those before it, of course, have had their own evaluations. So what can be done to achieve this set objectives for this new development plan 2021 to 2025? Let's listen into our correspondent's backgrounder, Ekene Intoloe, for starters.
For decades now, Nigeria has had a series of development plans spanning from the Colonial Development Plan of 1958 to 1968. Since then, the country has recorded a relatively long experience in development and national rolling plans with mixed results. Some of the major strategic initiatives include the Structural Adjustment Program, the National Economic Empowerment and Development Strategy, the Strategy for Attaining the Millennium Development Goals, and the 7-Point Agenda, most of which were not seen to have been effectively implemented. Then came second quarter of 2016, when Nigeria entered an economic recession. The present administration developed the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan for 2017 to 2020 for the purpose of restoring economic growth. The 2021 to 2025 National Development Plan, which recently got the approval of the Federal Executive Council, is designed to succeed the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, which expired in December 2020. The new National Development Plan was structured along 6 clusters, namely economic growth and development, infrastructure, public administration, human capital development, social development, and regional development, with an investment size of 348.7 trillion naira over the 5-year period. Contributions for this investment is expected to come from both the public and private sectors. The public sector will contribute 49.7 trillion naira, or 14.3% of the investment size, while 298.3 trillion naira, or 85.7%, will come from the private sector. Are Nigerians going to see a new narrative from the long list of previous development plans? What difference will this plan have in the lives of citizens? Guests on Good Morning Nigeria will be speaking to the issues in a moment.
Joining us to discuss this issue, we would like to welcome via Zoom, she's joining us from Lagos, Hajia Zainab Ahmed, the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning. Honorable Minister, it's our pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning. You can see her on the left side of your screen.
Good morning.
And we also have joining us for the conversation, a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, also via Zoom, Dr. Muda Yusuf is former Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Dr. Muda Yusuf, delighted to have you on Good Morning Nigeria again.
Good morning.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to our Benin Network studio where we have Ambassador Ayola Olukani, who is the Director General, NASIMA. He joins us, of course, from there. Excellency, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm from Benin, where NASIMA is having his 4th ESCO and council meetings. This is a very, very lucky one for us.
Thank you. All right, we'll return back to you. But back here in the studio, we have our very own, he's a familiar face, Niyi Akinshijo, who is a financial and investment analyst. Mr. Akinshijo, thank you for joining us always.
My pleasure as always. Thanks so much.
All right. Once again, our pleasure to have you all with us this morning. But let's begin with the Honorable Minister of Finance, Hajia Zainab Ahmed. Honorable Minister, we would, of course, stay with you for a while so that we get into some of the highlights, if not details, of the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025. If my memory serves me right, this is probably the first time we are having a national development plan so labeled in several decades. We've had all kinds of strategy papers and documents and growth projections and so on and so forth. But in terms of having a national development plan, so-called, this is the first we're having in several decades. The most popular, and that's the last one I remember very well, was that of General Gawan, 1970 to 1974. So, Honorable Minister, tell us what is unique about the new National Development Plan 2021 to 2025.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me and for the opportunity to discuss the national plan. Good morning, Nigeria. What is unique about this plan is a couple of things. First of all, this is truly a national plan. It is not a federal government plan. We made sure from the steering committee to the central working group to the 26 technical working groups that we had the states, we had the local governments, in addition to federal MDs, but a very large representation of the private sector, youths, women, people with disabilities. We also had representatives of the major political parties, 3 major political parties. Our intention is that this is a plan that should be owned by every Nigerian, and every Nigerian, every business, every ministry, department, and agency has a responsibility that is clearly defined in the plan. So it is truly a national plan. That's one. Secondly, from the beginning, we also set up an implementation structure for the plan. So there is a committee, a presidential committee that also has a cross-section of these representatives that is set up to continuously track the plan, and a plan implementation unit that is sitting in the Ministry of Finance, Budget, and National Planning, and their only function is to track the performance of this plan. We also costed the plan at 348 trillion naira, as I've also commend you for the introduction that has been done, with a clear identification of how much should be contributed by the government, which is 49.7 trillion, how much, and the balance to be raised by the private sector, and also from the government funding, how much is to be contributed by the federal government's 20 trillion and the balance from the states. So these are things that we didn't have clearly defined in other plans. Every plan must have a macro framework, which this plan has. The macro framework that we use is underpinned by we use the econometric model and also the computable general model. And the projection is generally informed by the design and strategic orientation of this framework. The framework projects an annual growth rate of 5% over the plan period. The growth is envisaged to come from high growth sectors like agriculture, trade, services, construction, manufacturing, communication, and a few others. The framework also identifying some binding constraints that we must continuously look out for and resolve. Otherwise, we will not be able to achieve the targets of the plan. Some mega trends also globally, as well as some trends within the region are also considered in the plan, and specific mitigating measures are identified. A major constraint that we had to always look out for is the inadequacy of infrastructure in our country, and also what we must do to be able to put in place the right and level of critical infrastructure to enable businesses to grow and contribute to the growth aspirations that we have. This plan is actually hinged on the growth of the private sector, and the philosophy is partnership with the private sector, enabling the private sector to be able to run businesses, because the growth of the economy is not dependent on government, it's actually dependent on the contributions of the private sector. So there are some reforms, growth and competitiveness issues that we also identified as cross-cutting issue in every sector of the plan, whether it is agriculture or manufacturing or oil and gas or mining. We continuously look at what reforms are going to be needed to ensure that we meet these growth aspirations. This plan comes in 3 volumes. So we have volume 1, which is the policy itself, and then volume 2 is the detail of this costing, the 348 trillion. Then volume 3 is the reforms that must be undertaken, including legislative reforms and amendments to laws or acts, as well as also any laws or new acts that need to be put in place. This plan, we had a good representation of youths, women in every technical working group, people with special needs. So we listened to every sector of the society. So it's a combination of a bottom up as well as top down approach that were used. In addition to that, we also identified, we worked through identifying the various funding sources that we must explore to be able to adequately fund the plan. There is a cross-cutting assumption that there must be fiscal discipline and institutional compliance with the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and also a drastic reduction in inefficiencies on government. One major requirement is that there must be a complete reform of the public service. If the public service doesn't work efficiently, this plan will be threatened just as other plans have been threatened. We also have a communications plan that is designed to not only educate everyone about what is in the plan, but also to enable its optics, including what is available for the private sector to be able to take part and actually contribute the way the plan anticipates that the private sector should be. I chaired the committee alongside with Mr. Atedo Peterside, who is the president of ANAP Foundation. And we had Nasima Man as steering committee members. Labour was also there represented. So it was a very interesting process. It was very intense. A lot of excellent work has been done, driven largely by this central working group chaired by Dr. Sarah Alade, who is a senior special advisor to the president, and Dr. Dikbelu, who is also another senior special advisor to the president, with several stakeholders working on a daily basis for several months to come up with this plan.
Honorable Minister, thank you. There seems to be so much going on in this new development plan. First, we're told it is a medium-term plan. It's supposed to succeed some initiatives like the ERGP and also the Vision 2020. Kindly deconstruct for us, in what context is this succeeding these initiatives?
So the ERGP was not an initiative. It was a national plan for 2017 to 2020. And the Vision 2020 also was a national plan, but a longer term national plan, while the ERGP was a medium term plan. So both plans expired in December 2020, which means we didn't have a national plan in place. So this plan succeeds those two plans is for a 5-year period from 2021 to 2025. And at the same time, we've started working on a longer term plan that we call the Nigeria Agenda 2050. So the moment this one is launched and implementation started, we're already reverting our attention to the development of the longer term plan. Every nation needs a plan to guide the implementation of governance in the country. We're very hopeful that because this is truly a national plan, that whichever government comes to succeed this administration, that they will continue with the major principles of the plan. The major objectives of the plan have been mentioned in your introduction. They are no-brainers that we clearly said we must establish a strong foundation of a strong, concentric, diversified economy with robust MSME growth and a more resilient business environment. Secondly, that we must invest in critical physical, financial, digital, and innovation infrastructure. And three, that we must build a solid framework that will be lynched on enhancing capacities to strengthen security and ensure good governance, and that we must enable a vibrant, educated, and healthy population. So those are the four objectives of the plan. Our belief is that whichever government is in power, we must be looking at diversifying, really deepening the diversification of the economy. We must invest in critical infrastructure. We must also be able to enhance and strengthen security and good governance, and that we must ensure that our population are well educated and they're healthy. So those are very basic things that we did, and we are very hopeful that the plan will succeed in implementation with all of the economic framework, the planning that has been done, as well as the continuous monitoring and implementation, and also the communications to back it up.
Sorry, just one more. Before Kingsley comes in, you kept on about the new plan being a truly national development plan. My question will be, is it national in terms of representation and constitution of, members, or is it national in terms of inclusivity in the deliverables to multi-level of, Nigerian citizens?
Both in the preparation as well as in the content of the plan and the implementation of the plan. We make sure that there's a regional, a development balance, so that each region of the country has some major infrastructure or development projects that are provided to be implemented during the course of the plan period. And that's the whole point about making sure you have representation. When you have local governments represented and states represented and the public in different spheres represented, everybody speaks out to what their community or their sectors require, and inputs are taken, and then consensus is arrived at, and it's incorporated into the plan. So it is meant to be a balanced development plan to make sure that no one is left, no spare of the country is left behind.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I get somewhat nostalgic now about national development plans that worked in the past, more particularly in the first, if you like, 15 years of our nation's independence. And I remember very well, as I said earlier, the General Gawan Development Plan of 1970 to 1974. It is the case that when you look at the infrastructural and industrialization component of that plan, that ultimately we were able to deliver the first expressways that we're having in Nigeria at some point. We also have the vehicle assembly plants with the clear idea, Volkswagen and PAN were both opened in 1975, with a clear indication that within 10 years, at least 70 to 80% of the components will be produced in Nigeria. And out of that was also the development of the steel complex at Ajakuta, plus the spin-off in other locations. We also had Steyr plant that was opened, I think, in Bauchi also. So these are issues that those who are nostalgic about development plans will be excited about, to say, look, what is it that we can look forward to in 2021 to 2025 new national development plan? And particularly, therefore, my question would be, what is the industrialization component of this new national development plan, against the background that we have had an industrialization master plan for a few years now? I don't know where we are in terms of implementation. How does it fit in? And then when you look at other areas such as oil and gas, you also have a gas master plan. How does that fit into this national development plan?
We used each of the sector plans, so from agriculture to oil and gas to mining, education, health. Each of the sectors today have sector-specific plans, and each of those plans were reviewed priorities extracted and put in the National Development Plan. So the National Development Plan helps to bring together all of those plans, and we're now able to compare and ensure that there's complementarity in the process between one plan and the other. Because the power sector, for example, would need to make their plans around what industry is requiring. And so also does the agricultural, the water resources sector will also need to make their plans to support the agricultural sector. So all of those plans were brought together. So we didn't come with blank and people started talking. No, we brought together the sector plans, and the plan was extracted. Priorities from each of those plans were extracted and brought into the national development to ensure cohesion and also ensure that we get the best out of each of the sectors.
All right, Honorable Minister, thank you. Let's put you on hold for a moment and bring in our other guests who have also joined in our conversation. Let me go to our Benin studio where we have Ambassador Ayola Lukane, who is also the DG of NACIMA. Well, NACIMA, of course, could be aptly described as the umbrella body of the private sector businesses and all that. If you look at the era that Kingsley talked about, the 1970-1974 development plan with all the successes that's under General Gowon and all the euphoria of the things that happened during then, does this new development plan bring you joy? Does it bring the private sector joy?
Thank you very much, Claire. Like I said, it's a pleasure to see the Honorable Minister on this program, and I say greetings to Nigerians and all other participants. I'm speaking to you from Benin, and where NACIMA is having its 4th ESCO as well as a council meeting. And it speaks to the fact that the issue which was raised by the Honorable Minister in terms of the question of ownership, as well as also what is going to happen at subnational level, is key and very, very important. That's why we go around the country, and I think this is where the focus will be. Of course, the Honorable Minister had identified why this plan is different, which gives us some joy in a way. But the heart of the matter, which should also be a matter of the heart for us in NACIMA and nationally, is the fact that implementation is key. Implementation is very, very important. And the potentials of implementation and having impact, especially through the national chambers, through the chambers across the country, is key and very important. Let me give you a very good example, because it's always very good, to concretize the abstractions. The Nsukka Chambers of Commerce has the program for the cultivation of the Nsukka yellow pepper. Nsukka yellow pepper project is being handled by that chambers. It brings together about 600 farmers who are in and around local government areas in Nsukka and helping them in terms of getting access. The Anchor Borrowers program, of course, has supported that, especially because of the involvement of the chambers. About 50 hectares, are supposed to be cultivated. This year, they're doing about 8 hectares. Under that, the beauty of it is that this is a project to help about 600 farmers to export the yellow pepper, the Nsukka yellow pepper, things they would not have been able to do on their own. So they are ready to do this through that particular framework. And of course, it's also for export. And the dimension is that when you are exporting abroad, the packaging must be right. You must also keep on to issues like the global gap and all of that. So this is what we are talking about. It's a good example of the potentials, one, of ownership of this national program, talking about the agricultural sector, through an organized body like the Nsukka Chambers of Commerce, and of course supported by NACIMA, and also bringing in all this one, because at the end of the day, the Honorable Minister has talking about ownership. Ownership at what level? And I think ownership at the subnational level, at the local government level, is key and very important. And that's why I'm giving that example as far as the National Development Plan itself is concerned, because that is the heart of the matter, and it should be a matter of the heart for us implementation, especially at that level. You can imagine the impact. 600 farmers in a place like Nsuka, where the yellow pepper is being exported and targeted to Europe and America. And of course, to take care and deal with the issues in such of, as far as the question of funding itself is concerned. Well, they've received some funds under the Anchor Borrowers program, but there's still much to be done in terms of having this desired impact. This is our target as far as NACIMA itself is concerned, using our chambers to impact and be part and key into the National Development Plan. There are other issues which I will talk about subsequently during the course of the program. Once again, it's nice to see Honorable Minister, my dear colleague, Dr. Muda Yusuf as well. In terms of, I sincerely hope you understand the point I'm making as far as the question of practical implementation. And that's what we're doing at this level. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ambassador Ayo Olukone there for your opening comments. Let's bring in Dr. Muda Yusuf, former Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Dr. Muda Yusuf, you're a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria when we're discussing economic matters. Are you excited about the new National Development Plan? And if so, why? Looks like we're not getting Muda. Namely, are you excited about the new National Development Plan? And if so, why? If not, why?
Yeah. Thank you very much, and good morning, Nigeria. Let me also commend the Honorable Minister for the amount of work that has been done on this plan. I must also testify to the fact that it was a very inclusive process. The private sector was involved. At least I know that the LCCI was also involved in the process of bringing this up. So that I think we must commend. It is also important for us to have this kind of plan so that the private sector can also have a very clear sense of direction as to what the government intends to do. It also will help to inspire long-term investment, because sometimes when you don't have a clear sense of the horizon, especially the long-term horizon, in which government is operating, especially the policy framework, the vision, and all of that, it leads to a concentration of investment at the short end of the economy. So I think one must commend that. It's also important. One thing that's also exciting about this is the fact that the government, at least through this plan, recognizes the very critical role of the private sector in the economy. We talk about the investment side that the Honorable Minister has talked about. The private sector is expected to bring to the table 85.7%. That is quite significant. But the worry we have is that if we expect this much from the private sector, are we really creating the environment for the private sector to contribute this much? I think that, for me, is one major worry. Secondly, is the fact that I feel that the 14.3% investment that has been projected in this plan for the public sector is a bit on the conservative side, especially having regard to the fact that, yes, the private sector can contribute a whole lot, but the government also has a very big role to play in investing in this economy, particularly in infrastructure. I appreciate the fact that the private sector can do a whole lot, but I know that the private sector cannot provide all the infrastructure. The government needs to bring something significant to the table. I mean, take the example of United States, which is one of the leading market economies around the world. Only a few hours ago, the president of the United States signed an infrastructure bill of $1 trillion. $1 trillion. The same thing is happening in China and all of that. So I would like to see a lot more in terms of scaling up government investment especially in infrastructure, because we are talking about investment, not just federal. We are talking about federal, we are talking about states, we are talking about federal. So we put all of this together, we should not be talking about 14.3%. And I think we need to do a lot. Then there is a worry about the issue of identity of each administration. Yes, the Honorable Minister has, very impressively laid out the plan and the need for all the succeeding administrations to plug into it. But from what we have seen, and this was also reflected in your intro, each administration wants to create an identity for itself. Even when you have a plan that is good, when you have programs that are good, each administration, whether at the federal or at the states, wants to create a separate identity for whatever reasons, maybe for political reasons or to be able to gain credit for whatever programs they do. And that has been a major problem. It has been one of the reasons why we are having a lot of abandoned projects all over the place. I mean, you talked about some of the previous initiatives that have taken place. You talk about Vision 2010. It was a very fantastic document. After that, we had the National Economic Empowerment Development Strategy, which was put in place by the Obasanjo regime. After that, we had the 7-point agenda by the Yar'Adua administration. Then we had the transformation agenda by the Jonathan administration. Then we had the Vision 2020. We have the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. Now we are talking of a National Development Plan. So this issue is a major problem. Issue of identity of administration. And because of that, people set aside whatever programs or plans that has been existing before they came into office. And this is not just peculiar to federal. It's also the same thing at the state level. And that has not been, we are not seeing government sufficiently as a continuum, which is not a good thing. And that culture of sustainability, that culture of building on what the previous administrations have done, I think we should have a way to make sure that this kind of thing happens. So those are the concerns that we have. Then there's also the worry about the capacity to execute plans and the political will to do so. The Honorable Minister has mentioned quite a number of initiatives around the reforms that need to take place. Yes, some of these things are on the table, but when it comes to implementation, it's a lot of time we fight shy of the political will to get some of these reforms done. As we speak now, we have quite a number of reforms that we have been grappling with all along. Then we need to create the environment for the private sector. The private sector is still not getting the right kind of courtesy, the right kind of attention, the right kind of respect that it deserves, given its contribution to the economy of this country. And we need to do a lot more in that direction, a lot more in creating the macroeconomic environment, ensuring the stability in policy, ensuring that the regulatory environment is right. Of course, institutional issues and all of that. We are grappling with quite a lot of that. And sometimes when you have these issues, there's very little intervention that you find, because especially now that the government is so bullish about issue of revenue. So these are some of the worries that one has. Then issue of policy harmonization. We have different arms of government moving in different directions. I mean, this point was made by the Vice President at the recent retreat by the ministers. It's a major problem. You have a plan. What we expect is that all organs of government should plug into the plan so that we are sure that we are all moving in the same direction and we're on the same page. But you have this territorial disposition of different organs of government, which is pulling the whole system apart. You have a plan, but people are operating in silos. So these are some of the risks that you see. But generally, I must commend the initiative. A lot of work had gone into it. It was a very inclusive process, but we need to deal with some of this, particularly creating the environment and giving the private sector the confidence that this is going to last, so that we can have a lot more long-term investments from the private sector.
Okay, Mr. Muda, just before we come back to the studio, I'd like you to explain further what you meant by 14% to the public sector being conservative. I'd just like you to give us a little in-depth, explanation of your thoughts. And then secondly, creating a conducive environment seems like, a general statement, specifically for the private sector. What are those enablers, that you will qualify as, enabling a private and conducive environment for you?
Now, about the 14.3%, the Honorable Minister has said it, that the investment size we are looking at in this plan is over 300 trillion. And that out of this investment plan, the private sector is expected to bring to the table 85.7% in terms of investment. And that the government, that's all the three tiers of government now, will be bringing 14.3% to the table. The point I'm making is that the 14.3% in terms of investment, particularly when we know that the government has a major role to play in infrastructure, not just the economic infrastructure, even the social infrastructure. So if you are talking about all the three tiers of government bringing 14.3% to the table in terms of the quantum of investment, I'm saying that that should be a lot more. And we can only make that happen if you look properly at the structure of our budget, so that you have a lot more resources committed to these investments, especially infrastructure investments. So that is the point I'm making. If you look at the structure of the budget of many of our governments, either federal, state, or local governments, in most cases, between 70 to 80% recurrent. So we are talking about a review of that kind of structure so that we can put a lot more investment on the table to support the aspirations of this plan. So that is what I meant by the percentage of resources that are being committed. Then the second point which we raise has to do with the issue of the enabling environment. Yes, it's a general problem, but you can put it in a number of compartments. Take the macroeconomic environment, for instance. Look at what businesses have been going through around foreign exchange. Apart from the depreciation issue, we have the issue of liquidity, we have the issue of unpredictability, we have the issue of the volatility, we have the issue of, so many issues around foreign, which is making it very difficult, especially for both domestic and foreign investments. This is a major issue. Then you have the galloping inflation. It's a macroeconomic issue. How do we deal with, because if we don't have a stable macroeconomic environment, you cannot expect investors to be able to put investments in place for a very long time. Then we have the issue of policy consistency. We have seen situations where we have a plan. People have looked at the plan, they have looked at the tariff book, they know what the fiscal policies are, they know what the tax policies are, and they invest. Sometimes some of this investment can take 10 to 15 years for you to be able to recoup investment. And before you know it, 1, 2, 3 years down the road, there's a major policy shift. And these things have thrown a lot of businesses out of gear that cause a lot of dislocations. So those are the kind of things. Then you have the regulatory environment. Now, we have a regulatory space where many of the regulators sometimes are more interested in revenue than ensuring that we have a business environment that is very conducive. Then we have sudden changes in regulatory space. So the kind of attention, the kind of relationship that will occur between the regulatory space and the investment space is still not happening. So these are some of the things that is of concern. Look at the situation with our ports. We have been on this port thing for almost 2 to 3 years. You need to go through the ports to understand the frustration that both the importers and the exporters are facing. Then look at this dispute resolution system. If you have a commercial dispute now, it can take you 5, 10 years for you to be able to resolve. So these are some of the issues that I'm talking about when I talk about the enabling environment. Of course, you have infrastructure issue, rules, and all of that. Those are bit medium to long term, but I'm talking about things around policy, around institutions, around regulation. Those are the issues I'm talking about.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Muda Yusuf. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation. Now, back to the studios, we've kept Niya Kinsiju waiting. Niyu, rather, let's have your take on the whole idea of the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025. Welcome, or?
Of course, I want to first commend the fact that the plan is well thought out. And naturally, for every plan, you expect certain limitations, even as you project implementation. But I am particularly impressed by the medium-term National Development Plan, as it were, as conceived. Yes, the former director of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce had made a number of issues around challenges, projected challenges and all that. But I have a feeling that the plan itself is supposed to address these challenges. That is why you have a plan. One, it is an identification and an acknowledgement of these problems, of these challenges. And the plan itself has multidimensional, approaches to attending and addressing these challenges. So to my mind, I think the plan would have to be commended, one, for acknowledging and identifying those challenges people like Dr. Muda, had been concerned about. So it's like it's a journey to resolving those challenges. And for me, I think if we have a review of what had happened in our immediate past, especially with the economic recovery growth plan, I think we can start talking about accomplishments in the ERGP, that we can use as extrapolation from a development plan, as it were, that had been impactful, because everybody agrees that to a large extent the ERGP was able to deliver on the mandates it was supposed to secure coming from the recession in 2016. And of course, as we also get into the recession in 2020, the economic sustainability plan also delivered on that. So I think going into the 2021-2025 plan, if the ARGP had been able to deliver one on reducing our food import, for instance, our food import bill as of 2014 was $3.4 billion, and by 2020 we are saying, at least by the NBS report, National Bureau of Statistics report, it had reduced to $560 million thereabout. Now, that's a major achievement. Now, it tells me that a plan can actually work, because a plan had been put in place over the last 4 or 5 years or thereabout, and it had been able to deliver on this. It's a major achievement, Then, again, if you look at how the financial sector had been able to support local businesses. Yes, it may not be enough, but if in the last, since the loan-to-deposit ratio policy of the CBN had been mainstreamed, more than 10 trillion naira had been created as new credits, for businesses, and not just businesses, even household consumption. So for me, again, that's also another major achievement. So we can start saying that the implementation of the 2021-2025 medium-term national development plan has already a pedigree of positive, appropriate implementation, because we have seen deliverables that are obvious and apparent from what the ARGP had been able to deliver, and even the economic sustainability plan. So going forward, I think the important thing is to start monitoring, all the objectives set out in the plan, and hoping, of course, that they would also deliver going forward on the 2021-25 plan. But I think more importantly is the fact that even the states are encouraged to domesticate the National Development Plan. So that it's no longer about the Nigerian National Development Plan. So each state now will also have its own development plan derived from the body of the National Development Plan, as it were.
Okay, Nige, thank you. Let's return to the Honorable Minister, who is joining us via Zoom. Honorable Minister, I know you've listened to the concerns raised by Muda and the Ambassador. It's concern about political capacity to implement and also capacity of the private sector itself to also deliver on the 85.7%, demands required of them. So how are you hoping, because by your is it terms of reference or a mandate, you're supposed to expand the capacity of the private sector to be able to deliver. What are the plans for this?
Well, Ambassador spoke about a lot of the challenges that the micro, small, medium enterprises face. But I'm glad to see that Nasima was fully represented and attended each and every one of our meetings, not just at the steering committee, but the central working group. And the essence was to understand these challenges so we have a good chance of putting in place reform measures that are required to address these challenges. And also, to the point that Dr. Muda made about the size of government projected investment being too low, at 49.7 trillion, almost 50 trillion, we don't think it's too low. Our view is that government should use its resources to unlock more resources and also to be able to support the private sector to actually do this investment. It will not be government that will be able to do the major investment that is required for critical infrastructure in the country. So the government will just be deploying only social infrastructure and social services. But any infrastructure that has a capacity to generate revenue, even if it is to maintain itself, but also we feel that there's so much that the private sector can benefit from by investing in roads and tolling them, by taking over airports and running them, by taking over the rail lines and running them. So that's where we're coming from. And government should, whether a government at state, federal, and local government, should prioritize meeting the needs of the private sector. We should just be working to provide the welfare of security and welfare of citizens and meeting the needs of the private sector. If we do that and we prioritize regulations, making sure that the business environment is right, making sure the legislation that we're doing is to enable the private sector to do more, then we'll be able to support the private sector to attain that 85.7% that is defined in the plan. Again, government funding is supposed to be an enabler. It's supposed to be to unlock opportunities and also to unlock more resources. So while government puts its own resources on the table, it will be to attract, maybe a lot of times it should be a tokenism, but to attract private sector to come and invest alongside it, or to raise other investment resources or even financing to be able to deploy infrastructure. I also want to comment on the issue that Mr. Nee has said. There was a lot of time spent in this process trying to understand what the challenges are. And that was the whole essence of bringing every stakeholder to the table, including the National Assembly. So we had 2 members of the National Assembly planning committees of the House and the Reps as members. So they were there, they were also listening. In some cases, it will be legislation that is required. And how do we sustain this plan to make sure that this plan is not changed by another administration or abandoned for another one to be made? We have thought during the discussions that we may need to legislate the plan, but there are also limitations of doing that, because when you legislate a plan, then it reduces your flexibility of being able to make amendments to meet the current realities of the plan. But that is still a possibility for the Nigeria Agenda 2050, because that would be a visioning document that will set very high level goals, while the 5-year medium-term plans will be setting out implementation. And that needs to have flexibility of being able to amend with the realities of the time. Some countries actually legislate their long-term plans. So regardless of what government of the day comes, there's already a national plan that must be guided even by parties carrying through their manifesto. There are some basic things that must be done. For example, in the UK, their national health insurance is sacrosanct. There's no party that will come and tinker with that. So those are the kind of things that we want to be able to achieve also by this medium-term plan and the Nigeria Agenda 2050.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable Minister and the other guests. We're going to have to take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation.
Mommy is ready to receive me a bundle of joy. Mommy is making my home cleaner and safer. We are Dettol, Dettol Sure.
Illnesses can happen at home too. That's why Dettol and me together will make my baby's home safe and to protect from up to 100 illness-causing germs. That's why moms want to be Dettol, Dettol Sure.
We are Dettol, Dettol Sure.
Dear compatriots, our country can be as great as we want.
Let us all commit ourselves to its greatness.
We must be willing to set aside our differences, unite and stay as one.
In our expansive landmass, human and material resources, and plurality lies our strength.
Let our challenges lead us to rediscover our common ground, and together, let's find solutions.
This will take some time, so it requires patience, tolerance, and forgiveness from every one of us.
Let all hands come on deck to protect and transform our country.
Let us unite and see each other not as adversaries, but as brothers and sisters.
Together, we can build a better Nigeria for ourselves and for the next generations.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency, NOA, with support from Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
The Super Eagles of Nigeria must overcome Blue Sharks of Cape Verde on the road to Qatar 2022 FIFA World Cup. Will they be successful? At the Testing Beloga Stadium, it's Nigeria versus Cape Verde in the African World Cup qualifier, showing on the network service of the NTA and Wazobia TV. With live radio broadcasts on Cool FM, Wazobia FM and Nigeria Info. You can also join us online at sporty.com and MPFL TV. The FIFA World Cup qualifiers are proudly brought to you by Bet Niger and supported by MTN, Coca-Cola and Dettol, proud sponsors of the Super Eagles of Nigeria.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We still have all our guests with us for this conversation. I want to return to the Honorable Minister of Finance. Honorable Minister of Finance, let's get into what some persons would say is a very critical component of all of this, whether we're making projections for the key pillars, that's to say human capital development, social development, and indeed economic growth. For whom are we planning? How many Nigerians are we planning for? There's a projection for 5% growth over the period, but for what number of Nigerians? We're having a population growth now of over 3% annually, and some say that is giving us a demographic crisis. And the fertility rate is about 5.5. So have these been factored in for us to say, look, these are the number of Nigerians we'll be planning for against 2025 and then beyond?
Indeed. We did factor in population. The Federal Ministry of Health is working on revising the national population policy. The National Population Agency was also a member of this committee. So we started with the baseline. The current numbers that are around now is 209 million Nigerians. And we factored in an increase of 2.5% on an annual basis over the 5-year period. Our hope is that when we come to the longer term plan, that will begin to also measures that are in the revised population plan that is currently ongoing, that is designed to begin to bring down the population numbers, that will not be able to take into account those declining numbers. But for now, the baseline is 209 million population, and an increase of 2.5% per annum is projected over the 5-year period. When we see the new population plan that the Health Ministry is working on, when it's completed, if we have to adjust the numbers, then with the macro framework that we have, we can do a midterm review and adjust the numbers.
I was also wondering, Honorable Minister, if you can just give us the highlights, the two critical elements of this. Talk about revamping the public administration and then human capital development. What is it that we have been able to do or utilize with ASCON, which is the Administrative Staff College of Nigeria at Tukpo in Badagry, which is of course an outgrowth of planning in the past. In recent years, we've been talking about Bureau of Public Service reforms. What do we want to reform about the public administration? Is the public service delivering on its mandate, or it's just a source of the huge recurrent expenditure that the country witnesses year in, year out?
So the reforms are targeted at achieving efficiency within the service, ensuring value for money, and also curtailing corruption and leakages that currently exist. I don't know if you remember about, I think whether it's 4 weeks or 5 weeks ago, the Federal Executive Council approved the new public service reform policy that was presented by the head of service. It's a work that has been going on for about 2 years, and it's finally being concluded. There's a lot of revisions on the structure of the service that needs to take place. There's a committee that has been set up to review the Oresanya report, and they've been given, I think, something like 3 weeks or 4 weeks to come back with how organizations need to be revised to be able to get the best efficiencies to cut down on wastages. Automation is already ongoing. The head of service is working with us in the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning on automating the human resource component of the IPPIS, which was not done before, but it's almost complete. The work is almost completed now. And there's also the e-governance that the head of service has picked up. My ministry, for example, we have a document management system that we're now able to actually work virtually in some of our major functions. So those efficiencies are very critical for improving the public service, for improving the regulatory processes, and for cutting down on time that is wasted, that is bureaucracy, and wastage is that the private sector ends up carrying the brunt of.
Honorable Minister, let's bring in Ambassador Ayola Olukoni. Ambassador, earlier on you talked about the yellow pepper growing company or outfits in the southeast, which of course has not yet been explored. And there are so many of such opportunities, scattered in different parts of the country, especially in the different economic clusters. So bearing that in mind, do you think that the private sector is vibrant enough or have the capacity to be able to contribute or meet up with the 85% requirement? And if not, what can be done to rev up, their potentials to deliver?
Quickly, because I know time is not in our favor. If you look at the Nigerian creativity sector, it's a very good example of what is a private sector initiative as well. Your Nollywood, your film studio, our artist is a reflection of the possibility of what can be done by the private sector. Now, if you look at the growth and development and as well as the Nigerian banks and financial sector across the world, I served in Nairobi for about 4 years as part of my course. When I served 2003, 2007, there are no Nigerian banks. The Nigerian banks are all over the place now. So it's an indication that as far as the private sector itself is concerned, we can perform in that particular area. I mean, we've performed in terms of the Nigerian banks across the West Coast. I'm wearing an ethnic fabric. The authentic Ogun fabric is there. It's an indication of the potentials of the private sector as far as the textile sector is concerned. Ethnic fabrics that can go on to Champs-Élysées, that can also go on to Fifth Avenue, New York. Now, let me now say a few things as we round off. I think the question how we succeeded with the ERGP is there. We succeeded because of the commitment and also involving people at the national level, at the subnational level. So implicitly, we can also succeed with this national plan. Now, we are here in Benin, like I said, for the 4th ESCO Council of NACIMA. And we are being hosted by BENCIMA, that is the Benin Chambers of Commerce, that is doing its trade fair now. We will be seeing the governor. It is fortuitous that the Edo State government has also now unveiled its own national plan, 30 years plan. So implicitly, this is an action at the subnational level. And this is one of the messages we are bringing about in here, that states at the subnational level should wake up to it in terms of what can be done. And since the private sector is being challenged, I tell you that as DG NACIMA receives requests from abroad almost every day in terms of, please identify for us credible companies we can work with. I can give you the good example. Just recently, the QDB. QDB is the Qatar Development Bank that wants to come into the Nigerian space to work closely with the private sector. So it's an indication of the potentials as far as the private sector itself is concerned, and that we can deliver. But the key issues which has been raised by my brother, Dr. Muda Yusuf, is also there. And also, finally, take, for example, the mining sector. I used to, quote somebody, find me, who say that I also became an accidental miner because I was our High Commissioner to Australia. And I saw what mining did as far as Australia itself is concerned. A state in Australia was earning $60 billion from iron ore export. Look at Kogi State. Look at our potential in that particular place. So what we are doing in NACIMA is to encourage our mining states, your Kogi, your Nasarawa, your Ebonyi, all over the place, to encourage them to key into the mining sector. And since they say it's going to be the private sector, that will, of course, drive that process. It means that these states can set up special purpose vehicle to harness the mining potentials in their respective states. And I think this is it. And I think at the end of the day, it is not the national development plan, like the minister said, for Abuja. No, the state's government should also come up with initiative to be able to do that. And like I said, the Chambers movement is a sure bet to be able to key into this national development and deliver on its goals as well as objective of it itself. And I think this is very key. This is very important. This is our vision in NACIMA, and we will continue to pursue that.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Olukoni, for your comments. We are pressed for time. Of course, we have the opportunity of returning to this subject matter and dealing with it in greater detail. I just wanted to touch on one or two aspects with Dr. Muda Yusuf. Dr. Muda Yusuf, let's take, for instance, human capital development. That's a pillar of the development plan. I don't have the details, But I will be curious to find out, again, I have this sentimental attachment to the last major development plan that we had in the country, to say, what is the projection for us during this period? How many Nigerians do we want to go to school, primary school, secondary school, and then tertiary education? Who will be providing the schools? Who will be providing the teachers? If it's private sector versus public sector, who contributes what? Are we still going to be issuing licenses for the establishment of private universities, just as we are seeing now with also radio and television licenses all over the place? Are we still, where is component of teacher training? I tell you that I'm sentimental about this because if you recall, in 1974, the federal military government at the time was already planning, was already implementing aspects of what became UPE, that's Universal Primary Education, in 1976, through the expansion of the teacher training program, through the expansion of the NCE program, through the establishment of all kinds of measures that will ensure that once you had this delivery process, people are coming out from primary school, they are getting to secondary school, they are getting into tertiary institutions. Are we likely to see that kind of assembly line in this particular instance, so that it is not just sufficient that I go to the Ministry of Education maybe in Lagos or elsewhere, and I'm given approval to go and set up a private school. For whom am I doing this? And does it fit into the national plan? Do we have this kind of holistic, gel of the critical issues in terms of human capital development? If we say we want to produce 1,000 neuroscientists by year 2025, are we ready for it? If we want to produce 1,000 aeronautical engineers, are we ready for it?
Yeah, thank you. Although I have not seen the full details of the plan, but I'm very positive that these concerns that you have raised have been properly captured in the plan, especially given the very robustly inclusive approach that the ministry and all those who are putting together the plan have adopted. So I imagine that all this because issue of human capital development in Nigeria has become a public-private sector issue. Just as we see in health, we also see in education. The private sector is playing a major role in both health and education. And I know that health and education investments are very critical to human capital development. I think what is important in all of this is for us to ensure that there is proper regulation so that we are channeling the programs, the curriculum, and we're ensuring that because the economy is dynamic, therefore the curriculum also has to be dynamic. So we need to ensure a proper alignment of both the industry needs and the curriculum of schools. So it's largely a regulatory issue, and I'm also confident that by the time we unveil, we see the full details of this plan, this particular concern will have been addressed. But having said that, let me quickly just mention few things. First, just to seize the opportunity of the presence of the Honorable Minister to emphasize the need for policy harmonization and coordination among the key economic ministries and agencies. The Central Bank, the Finance Ministry, the Customs, the Trade and Investment Ministry, the Ministry of Agri, NIPC, all of them. We want to see a proper harmonization, a proper coordination, a clearing house, so that this will remove some of the uncertainty, some of the concerns that investors have. Secondly, I want to appeal to the Honorable Minister to please ensure that we see the customs play a much more role in trade facilitation. The Nigeria Customs is too focused on revenue, and in the process, they are halting investment. So please, Honorable Minister, you have oversight over the Nigeria Customs Service. Let us see a greater emphasis in the issue of trade facilitation, particularly issues around the dispute resolution system that is credible, that is independent, that can inspire confidence, especially in the international trade process. I also like to appeal to the Honorable Minister to review the rules in tax tribunals. If there is a dispute between the tax authorities and investors, the rule that says that the investor has to pay 50% of the amount in dispute before the appeal can be heard. It's not fair. Please, we want to appeal to the Honorable Minister, if you can please review these rules so that people can have easy access to appeal, not putting a barrier that they have to pay 50% of the amount in dispute before the appeal can be heard. These are very critical elements when we say we are promoting investment and want to get the private sector to play a major role in the delivery of this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Muda. Thank you, Muda. Let's take the final response from Niyi. Niyi, I'm also concerned when we look at the funding sources. Already, part of what we know is that there'll be broadening of the tax base. That's for the public sector to contribute the 14 point. But what are your thoughts? If Muda is saying 14% is too small, and the minister is saying, no, we don't think it's too small, what other areas can, funds, be sourced from?
No, I think the honourable minister is clear on this, and I think the plan also is clear on this. For me, the 14% is not too small, because it's supposed to be an enabler. It's supposed to stimulate activities in the private sector, and there have been advocacy over the years, on why the Nigerian private sector should drive our economy, and I think that is the challenge this plan is giving the private sector. One, all the issues Dr. Yusuf had raised had to do with policy and coordination of and harmonization of all these policies. So it's principally about government addressing those issues. They are not fiscal issues in the real sense of it. So, and of course, going forward, what the plan is also talking to is robust private-public partnership. That's what the plan is talking to. So the readiness, to concede to concession projects, to the private sector. So for me, it's about enabling the private sector, and of course also enabling foreign direct investment. That is one particular area we have had shortfalls, in Nigeria over the years. So if we have just about 20 to 25% increase in foreign direct investment. I'm talking foreign direct investment. I'm not talking about foreign portfolio investment here, that hot money. But money that you are sure will come into the Nigerian economy, will stabilize for 15 to even 30, 40 years, You will provide a lot of economic activities, and of course, it will also enhance our revenue. So going forward, your concern still talks to policy harmonization. Properly conceived policies and properly implemented policies. Once those ones are in place, there was a time we were talking on this program on why we cannot have a rail line from Kogi, to Abuja. And it had to do with policies on PPPs. So I think this plan is talking to how PPPs would be implemented across segments of the economy.
All right, Niyi Akinseju, thank you very much. And indeed, the other guests would like to appreciate. And Claire, we were speaking a while ago in terms of aspects of the human capital development. I'm sure by the time we have access to the fuller document, some of these things probably could be there. I mean, Dr. Mohammed Bello, who is a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, is a clinical oncologist, a consultant. It tells you about the paucity of oncologists in Nigeria. These are cancer specialists. So how many of them do we intend to produce over the next 5 years or over the next 10 years? Several other areas that you can look at and say, look, what are our shortages, and then how do we ramp up production by granting scholarships and so on and so forth. So that's it for our conversation segment. We'd like to thank all our guests who have been with us this morning. The Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Hajia Zainab Ahmed. She joined us via Zoom from Lagos. We also would like to thank Dr. Muda Yusuf, former DG of Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, also with us via Zoom. From Benin City, the capital of Edo State, Ambassador Ayo Olukone, Director General of NACIMA. Delight having you. I hope you enjoy your stay in the ancient city of Benin. And here in the studios, Niyi Akinseju, Financial and Investment Analyst. Deep thanks for being part of our conversation this morning. So let's go over now to the sports desk. All right, so that's it for us on Good Morning Nigeria today. Thank you for tuning in. The program is back tomorrow, same time, 7 in the morning. Look after yourselves. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
Indeed, look after yourselves. I am Claire Adilabo Abdul Razak, and that would also include that you join us in our campaign against rape and rapists. From me and the production crew, have a great day.